Hi everyone, it's Yvette Blowitz from SPAITGIRL.com and welcome to the Spirit Girl Talk Show podcast. I'm super excited to be here with you today and with our very special guest, Melody Wilding, who is an executive and leadership coach for smart, sensitive, high achievers. She's here to help you break free from self-doubt and overwhelm, master your emotions, and use your sensitivity as the superpower that it is. Recently named one of Business Insider's most innovative coaches, Melody has coined the groundbreaking idea of sensitive striving. She has helped CEOs, leaders, and top performers at the world's most successful companies, including Google, Facebook, JP Morgan, and many more. Her work has been featured in the New York Times, the Oprah Magazine, NBC News, and dozens of other high-profile publications. So Melody is a sensitive striver herself. She is also the author of Trust Yourself, and we're going to be diving into her brand new book in our podcast show today. So I'm going to welcome Melody Wilding and our podcast audience globally. How are you today?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing great. This is just the perfect way to be spending my day. So thank you so much.
Well, Melody, before we dive into your book, can I say your skin is absolutely glowing. What are your skincare tips?
Oh, I'm not sure if it's the skincare or if it's my camera and my good lighting. That might be at play here. I keep it very simple. I am very low maintenance in pretty much all areas of my life, my skincare included. So I use a very gentle moisturizer. I think that was one of the big changes I made over the past few years is I used to use a scrub, but now have switched to a very gentle face wash. And I just use a daily toner and a vitamin C serum, and that's pretty much it.
Well, your skin is glowing. So for our Spirit Girl skincare junkies, I had to share that tip with you. And if you go to the Spirit Girl YouTube, you'll also not only get to see Melody's beautiful skin, but also so many books behind her. So Melody, before we dive into your book, can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
This book really came about because of my own personal experiences and my professional experiences. So by way of background, I am a licensed social worker, which means here in the States, I started off my career as a therapist. And that was actually what I always wanted to do with my life. I was just one of those weird kids who knew that I was very perceptive in understanding people and observing them, and really just loved psychology and the way people ticked. So I did research psychology, went on to get my degree in social work, and now have been coaching high achievers and top performers for over 10 years. But on the personal side, as I said, I've always been a little different, and I definitely thought a little weird in that I was always so sensitive. I have been told from a young age that I'm very sensitive, take things personally, need to grow a thicker skin, all of those things that sensitive people are used to hearing. And really, it took me to a point where early on in my career, I had let my sensitivity go so unmanaged. I had let my insecurities get the best of me. I was living a life that was so stressful and depleting on my nervous system that it really led me to a point of complete burnout where my body and my mind just said no more. And I hit a point where I tell a story in the book where my really breaking moment was I skipped one of my best friend's wedding weekends to work instead. And I just saw how a lack of boundaries, my perfectionism, that obsession with hustle had taken over. And during that same time hit a very severe burnout where my hair was falling out. I was having heart palpitations, and it really just stopped me in my tracks. And luckily, unlike most people, I was very privileged that I had all of the tools I needed. I had a training in psychology and therapy. I had everything I needed to turn it around. I just needed to use the tools I had used with my clients on myself. And so that's what I did to help realize that I was sensitive and master that in myself, but now also have built up that coaching practice of doing so over the past 10 years and culminating in the book, which is really packaging that all together in a guide for other sensitive strivers to do the same.
Thank you for sharing your story. It is in the book about your burnout, and you really open up to help others. In that pivotal moment when you weren't at your best friend's wedding and you were working, was there a moment where you can remember yourself there thinking, what am I doing here working?
I can. And I can feel it like it's yesterday. And it was a sticky summer day. We have very humid summer days here in the New York City area. And it was a sticky, humid summer day. And I was sitting in a Starbucks because it was so hot. I just needed to get out of the heat and be somewhere else. And I was just in this place with all of these strangers that I didn't know around me. And I can remember I had a Word document in front of me, and it was just the cursor was blinking. And I can just remember that so vividly and remember thinking, what am I doing? I skipped this momentous once in a lifetime event for this. And that was a wake up call, as was, I can remember times where I was so exhausted and depleted and really just a shell of myself. I can remember days where I was too weak to get out of bed. I was so tired and run down and just had nothing left to give that I could not do anything with myself except sit there. And those two memories stick in my head as really pivotal.
And do you feel that you were using work, you were just striving to achieve and do more and more and more? Because we're now living in times of a more culture, of a hustle, like hustle right up till the moment you have that shower and hit the bed. Like there is no reflection, there is no downtime, there is no just being present. It's a go, 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 go. How do you now build in time for contemplation or reflection or some kind of space or balance or self-care?
Well, just like you said, it was absolutely that addiction to work was masking all of my insecurities. It was sort of in my head had this equation that if I do more, then I will feel worthy. I will feel better about myself. And in the book, I call this, or I refer to this as something I call the honor roll hangover, which is when those same tendencies and habits of being the good girl, and I'm sure many listeners can relate to this, that you were the good girl in school, you behaved, you were conscientious, you got good grades, you went to a good university, you got a good job, and you feel like you ticked all of the boxes. And yet either you're still not happy, or you get to a point in your career where you feel like, where's my A+? How do I get an A+ now? How do I be good enough? Let me just do more, try to work more, offer more products, offer more of my time to my clients. And you just keep trying to give and do in an effort to shore up your own self-esteem and self-worth. And it doesn't work. It ends up backfiring, which is the short story. Realizing I was sensitive. I had always known sort of in passing, like, oh yes, I'm sensitive, but did not realize it was a very real biological trait. And I can remember in my 20s, I read Dr. Elaine Aron's book, The Highly Sensitive Person. And that was like the skies parted and opened up for me. And her book describes sensitivity as a personality trait, as related to genetics and certain brain differences that about 20% of the population has. And in that moment, it was like everything clicked for me, that there was an explanation for why I was the way I was, or why certain things affected me so much more than other people. And so really recognizing that not only did I have this tendency of being highly sensitive, But I also have this natural striver side, and those two things go together, are a unique combination, has really helped me manage myself so much more effectively because I understand that I have different energetic or mental and emotional needs. And that doesn't make me inadequate. It just means I need to be more conscientious about how I approach my life and set things up to work for me. You asked about self-care. I want to answer that question. So for me, I have to take self-care very seriously. So for me, especially during pandemic times when we're on lockdown and a lot of our normal mechanisms have been stripped away from us, what has been my saving grace during this time is every single day I try to get out for at least a 30-minute walk, if not an hour-long walk. And that has been transformative for me because it gets me moving, it gets me outside, a change of environment instead of being in my apartment here. But it's also a time to clear my head. It's a time to connect with my family. It's a time to listen to podcasts and things I enjoy. So it really is multi-purpose in that way. So those daily walks are huge for me in making that a regular habit. Another one is breathing or meditation. A few months ago, picked up what is called Wim Hof breathing. He's a man. He is called the Iceman. You may have heard of him. It's becoming more popularized. Yeah. But he has this method of controlled breathing. And I try to do that every evening or some sort of a meditation. I do Epsom baths a couple times a week. And I try to get out of the city as often as I can, because I know for me, really being in nature is just a reset for my nervous system.
I love your self-care rituals, and obviously you love to switch looking at social media, photos and videos of other people, which can trigger imposter syndrome or perfectionism, to reading an old school, like a hard copy or soft copy, like a book.
Mm-hmm.
When you did burn out, did you find you were doing no self-care at all and literally just working?
That's a great question. This is going to be a little bit of a nuanced answer. I think I was doing self-care, but it was not restorative. I was doing things that you would consider self-care, but my motivation behind them felt like just ticking another box that I had to do. Working out, yoga, getting my nails done, any of those things. But my motivation behind it was I have to do these things, not I want to do these things. So my approach to them felt more perfectionistic and felt more anxiety or fear fueled than it felt restorative. And that's what I think self-care is about. It's really about your mindset and your approach to those activities rather than the activities themselves.
And I can relate to that. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners will be able to, where when I was a little bit younger, you'd work out just to look good, or you just do it because, like, my mindset was I have to do it. Even if I was tired, exhausted, it didn't matter. It had to happen, which is really unhealthy, because the process of self-care, as you've mentioned, is about tuning into what you need and going with ease and going with flow and really enjoying it and really nourishing yourself from the inside out and filling your cup up, and it to feel joyous and not a superficial thing or not a perfectionist thing. You're not doing it to look good for other people, or you're not doing it to look a certain way to be able to take photos of yourself for Instagram. You're doing it truly for your health and wellness, your mental health, your well-being, to really keep a really beautiful, fulfilled life where you're connected with yourself and all the elements of Mother Earth. Now, Melody, I want to ask, sensitive strivers, which you've coined for our podcast listeners, what does that mean?
So a sensitive striver, I've been referring to it a little bit, but that is someone who is highly sensitive and high achieving. So you think and feel everything more deeply, but you are also driven, ambitious, and you put a lot of pressure on yourself to succeed.
Okay, I think we can all relate to that. I was like, tick, 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 tick. Because we are striving. We're living in times now where we're told we've got to build our personal brand. where we are a brand, where we literally, not all people, but a majority of people, if you look at social media, are treating themselves as a product. I believe that there is a possibility that we may or could become disconnected with our true self when it becomes to a sensitive striver. What are some things we should look out for? How can we check in if we're to make sure we're not becoming overwhelmed?
You're exactly right. Because we're more sensitive, we're more attuned to and influenced by our surroundings or any of the stimulus we take in. So we're more affected by all of those images on social media and then tend to judge ourselves more harshly. So what I think it might be most helpful here is to go over in the book, I share a framework for really knowing yourself, but also assessing yourself as a sensitive striver and where you're most in balance versus out of balance. There's 6 key qualities that make up what it means to be a sensitive striver. The first one, well, they form the acronym STRIVE. So very easy to remember, STRIVE. First one is sensory sensitivity. That is everything pertaining to your physical body, your physical state, your nervous system. So when your sensory sensitivity is well balanced, you're calm, you're able to maintain grace under pressure, for example. When it's unbalanced, you are overstimulated, you're overwhelmed, you may get anxious, particularly if you feel put under pressure or as if you're being evaluated. So I see that a lot when people freeze up under pressure. So that's sensory sensitivity. Then we have thoughtfulness. So thoughtfulness reflects that ability we have to process information more deeply, think more deeply, which makes us intuitive, reflective. We're just naturally very thoughtful people. But when that's unbalanced, that can lead to things like overthinking, indecision, worry, self-doubt, all of those wonderful things. The R is responsibility. So that we're starting to get into the striver side now, which responsibility is about being loyal, dedicated to other people. Sensitive strivers tend to be the team player, the person you can count on to follow through. But at the same time, we're people pleasers. We can't bear to let people down, even if it means sacrificing our own well-being. Then we have inner drive. Again, the strive side here. So inner drive is all about ambition. And when that is well balanced, you are going after goals in a sustainable, achievable, realistic way, goals that are personally meaningful to you. When it's unbalanced, that is where your ambition is running amok. So maybe you're overworking, you're feeling that pressure to be a personal brand, to turn every hobby you have into a business or a service, for example. Or many times I see this with people that set sky high goals where they actually set themselves up for failure because their goals are unachievable. Then we have vigilance. So vigilance is that attunement to other people's emotions and being able to sense other people's states. So when it is well balanced, you are responsive to people's needs in a way where you're able to care for them and support them. But when it's unbalanced, you're almost paranoid. You almost are perceiving danger where there is none, reading into feedback or thinking people are talking about you, for example. And then the last in our strive is emotionality. So again, this is a big part of sensitivity, feeling things in an intense, deep way. Our emotionality is what allows us to experience the richness of life and also allows us to be really effective at persuading people, influencing people. So sensitive strivers actually tend to be great salespeople because they're so empathetic and in touch with their own feelings. But when this emotionality is unbalanced, you can go down emotional spirals. You may get stuck in certain negative feelings for too long. So that's what I would offer to anyone is to really go through, and there's a full assessment in the book to take you through this strive diagnostic. There's a whole tool in the book where you map your current state with where you want to be and you follow your progress throughout the book. But you can even just do sort of a quick back of the napkin assessment of where do I think, which of these strive qualities do I think I'm most balanced in and least balanced in? And what does that mean about what is the best starting point and what I should prioritize for myself?
I love, love, love that. And I love that in your book, I have to say, because especially during COVID-19, I know I'm a typical sensitive striver where you want to help everyone. And I could feel, and Melody, you could probably relate to this and everyone else tuning in. I could feel the heaviness of people's suffering and people's pain. And I just wanted to get in and help as many people as I could. And then I discovered there's only so many people you can help in a day or in a week. And that's something I've noticed I have to check in. And I did notice if I tuned into too much news and saw photos and visual videos and read content, like heartbreaking content, even more recently from India, what was happening there, or in America with what was happening, playing out in your country, it was just so heavy. So that's another thing, isn't it? We need to check in if it's really affecting us and then disconnect. What I had to do was stop literally looking at the news and disconnect, and then tune into more positive content like reading a book, like Trust Yourself, and really just switching the frequency. Is that something that you can feel as that sensitive striver?
Oh, 100%. It's about stimulus in is what you get back out. And I'm always saying that to people. A lot of folks come to me and say, I'm so anxious at night. My mind doesn't turn off is a common thing I hear. I wish there was just an off switch for my brain. And it's exactly what you were saying, creating some of those internal and external boundaries about what you allow yourself to be exposed to and what you take in. And of course, in this case, it doesn't mean being uninformed. You're informed, but with a degree of self-respect and protection in a boundaried way. And so when people come to me and they say, my mind can't turn off, more practically, what we work on for them, for example, is creating a defined endpoint to the end of the day. Because what often happens in this COVID environment is that the day never ends. There's always more work you can do. You can always open up your laptop again and just get a few emails out. And it's really important that we develop that almost self-discipline with ourselves to respect our time and our energy enough to set those boundaries, pick an endpoint so that in the evening, your mind isn't overstimulated and over-energized because you've been exposing it to, yes, your blue light and everything like that, but working on business problems and chewing over, I'm not sure what's going to happen next. And your mind is trying to close those loops. You need to manage that and especially bring finality to the end of the day. That's a big area. I see this come up for people.
I only just experienced that literally yesterday when I had a day off in my home, but I was so tempted to want to look at work emails and respond to people and ring people back and all of this. And I went, hang on a minute. I'm not at work. Even though I'm at home, I had to really set the boundary to go, no, this is literally my day off, even though I'm at home, and 12 million people are in lockdown in Australia at the moment. But I had to go, today's the day off. Tomorrow, when I get back to work, that's when I get into it. But you're so right. It's disciplined and discipline. So this imposter syndrome, I actually grew up as a little kid, didn't know this word, didn't know anything about it. It wasn't talked about when I was at school or even initially in my career. What is this imposter syndrome?
So imposter syndrome, I talk about it as a form of overthinking, but very specifically, it is feeling like a fake or a fraud, despite the fact that you are accomplished and you have evidence of that. So people with imposter syndrome frequently feel like they are not good enough, they are not smart enough. At any moment, someone is going to reveal them as not knowing anything about their field or being incompetent. And imposter syndrome it's a phenomenon, really. It's not a mental health diagnosis, but it's a certain characteristic way of thinking about situations. So you may credit your success to luck or timing, saying, "Oh, it was the team that brought that together. I was just in the right place at the right time, and someone opened a door for me, and that's why things worked out." So you actively undermine yourself. But with imposter syndrome, you may fall into perfectionism because you want to make something just so, it needs to be just right before you put it out there. Because if you don't do all of that work, well, then people may discover you actually have no idea what you're doing. Or some people respond to imposter syndrome with avoidance. They may avoid putting themselves out there. They don't want to go on a podcast or write their blog or update their website, for example, out of fear of what people might think about them. So it's really this sense of intellectual fraudulence.
Do you feel that this whole imposter syndrome, though, has really taken off purely because we now have access to every single, say, author around the world, every single model or a speaker or whatever it might be? It could be a florist, it could be an artist. The level of insight into other people now is through the roof. Whereas, say, when I was a little kid, like it was only on TV or a magazine. And even when I started blogging 10 years ago, I just would sit behind the computer, write the blog, put it out. People would just go to that page. So I personally wasn't looking at other people's blogs or even comparing my blog to someone else. It was just, this is me, this is my destination. You come to like here, you leave, I stay here. I don't know what else is going out in the world apart from my passion of spas. But do you feel that now, because we've got visual access to everything, this is why it also crops up?
I think that's a big part of it. The access where we're, as people say, we're comparing ourselves to other people's highlight reels constantly. And then we think, well, why aren't I doing that? What's wrong with me? Why aren't I measuring up? Right. And it almost feels like this race that you have to keep up with constantly. So it's absolutely the access. Hustle culture also tends to contribute to this. I think if there has been any positive that has come up of imposter syndrome kind of becoming a bigger thing, it's that people feel a little less alone in this, because it's kind of this secret thought, I think, that many of us, particularly women, have, where we just feel inadequate all of the time. And I know certainly in my case that I felt like, oh, it's just me. It's just me. I'm just the only one who has these thoughts, and I don't know what's wrong with me. When in actuality, the research shows 70% of people will experience this at some point in their careers, and 50% of both men and women experience it weekly or more. So that's a lot of people who are going through the same thing. And so I think if anything, actually having these conversations has helped normalize it a little bit.
When you wrote your book, Trust Yourself, what is the meaning behind the title?
They say you need to teach what you most need to learn. And that is absolutely true in my case. So Trust Yourself, the title really came about because the book is really a guide for sensitive people to master that sense of self-doubt, inadequacy, imposter syndrome, and learn how to channel their natural qualities, who they are, and embrace that as their strengths. And so really learning to trust yourself, trust your assets, your intuition, have confidence in making decisions and doing things that are right for you, and really disconnecting from other people's opinions and expectations. So that concept of trusting yourself, I just felt very strongly really described the goal of what the book was trying to achieve.
I love the title of your book. It's so amazing. We're going to talk a little bit more about how you even found time to write the book in amongst your career and work and business. But it's so interesting, that whole concept, trust yourself. Would you feel that if someone has a skill, it's about the doing part, it's about learning, it's about growing, it's about improving? Like sometimes we think we have to just show up and be the best, have it all, know it all. But it's a process, isn't it? Like a growth process, whatever you're crafting, whether you're writing books or a blog or baking cakes or whatever the craft might be. If we apply growth and learning, does that help with the self-doubt and the insecurities?
Yes, definitely. And I love what you said, because an additional part to trusting yourself that I would say is not that you will show up and every time you're going to knock it out of the park and perform at your top level. It's really about knowing that you can rely on your resourcefulness, your capabilities, your resilience to bounce back, even when things don't go perfectly, and that you don't have to let those sorts of things paralyze you. So fundamentally, yes, you're right that it's actually relying on the fact that you do have a growth mindset, that you don't have to be perfect and flawless all of the time, but rather that you can do hard things. And I have an entire chapter on that. The idea of taking risks is really about expanding your capacity to be with discomfort and to do hard things. And to me, that's a big part of trusting yourself, that I can put myself in uncomfortable situations, or I can feel and experience uncomfortable feelings. And that doesn't mean anything is wrong or bad about me, but it may be data, especially in the case of imposter syndrome. Many times when we feel imposter syndrome, it's because we're pushing ourselves, we're rising to a new level. And so many times those emotions can be signals.
Have you found that with this visual metrics now on many, many social media apps, that's really been a sticking point for some people who have got self-doubt? They worry about if they put a piece of content out, if it's people are going to respond to it. I've heard of people even deleting posts if they only got, say, 10 likes because they were too embarrassed for other people to see. Are we spending too much time on the outcome? Everything we post has to have thousands of people like it. It has to go viral. Are we living sometimes in a culture where it's metrics based, and we're kind of removing ourselves away from the intent or the purpose of what is the purpose of this post?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I was referring to the honor roll hangover earlier. And that's a sign of the honor roll hangover, is being more fixated on the outcome than you are on the process. And absolutely, I see that with my clients who are business owners, colleagues, people in my community. People get really preoccupied in particular about what are people going to think about me if I put this piece of content out there? Are they going to think it's stupid? Are they going to judge me if it only gets a few likes? And that really holds people back from, as you were saying, the real goal should be, I'm going to put this out there and see what happens. Or I want to see who I become as a result of pushing through this. Or I want to explore my writing and get better at that. And I know the only way to do that is to create consistent content, even if not many people are showing up now. I'm willing to sacrifice the short term for a longer term gain. But so many times we're so focused on the immediate, oh my gosh, this only got 10 likes. I need to take it down now before somebody sees this and judges me, that we lose out on all of those other benefits. And we allow other people's imagined expectations and perceptions to control us, which when you think about it is really scary.
It's interesting, Melody, because one of the things I often say with my podcast show is I've had like guests and they go, oh, like, will people see this? And I go, yeah, in about 100 years time they will. And they start laughing and I go, we're not recording it just for this generation. We're recording this show for generations to come. When we're long gone, they're going to listen to this YouTube well beyond our time. And that really gets people thinking, oh, hang on a minute. No, we're not creating this for the amount of views or likes or popularity right now. We're here to share words of wisdom to help people right now, but also for generations to come. And I think, have you found when we go to intent and purpose and it's to serve others, it's of a higher value or nature than just our own perfectionism or superficial or like the me syndrome, that can also help?
Yes, what you were saying remind me of a client I was once working with, and she was a thought leader and was trying to get more comfortable building her brand in an authentic way. This was something she really wanted to do. It was an extension of her purpose, but she was getting really tripped up by putting videos and blogs out there. And I remember saying to her, do you realize every time you hold back and you don't publish something because you're scared, that's one more, 100 more, 1,000 people who suffer, who don't get your help and the wisdom and the information that you have. And that was the switch for her, that even if there was one person that she could help, or that by holding back, she was not helping, that there was really someone in pain and in need who needed what she had. That was the switch for her, that if I could just focus on one person and really root into and focus on my intention here and why I wanted to do this in the first place, that really shifted her mindset.
A lot of people come to me and say, oh, I've got to do a public speaking event. I don't know what people are going to think about me. What am I going to wear? Like, oh my goodness, everyone's going to be looking at me. And I'm like, do you realize this isn't about you? Yes. What is the message you want to share?
Yes.
Why are you even doing the talk? Like, what's the purpose? What are you going to show up and share? Got nothing to do with the way you look, but I think because we live in these times of perfectionism where people are bombarded with cosmetic surgery, fillers, perfect look, they feel so that people are going to be looking at them. I'm like, no, they're going to be listening to your words, your story. Like, what is it you're going to share with them, and how can you transform their life? If someone was wanting to, say, do public speaking or even just talk about their brand or their product or even raise awareness to a charity or a passion or a higher purpose, what would be some tips for them?
One thing you're talking about is an idea in psychology, which is known as the spotlight effect, where we feel as if the spotlight is always shining on us. We are the center of attention. Everybody sees our flaws, that mistake we made, how we flubbed our words. But people really don't notice any of that, number one. Number two, people are often so focused on themselves, they have their own spotlight shining on themselves. And number three, those minor imperfections, if you can even call them that, they humanize us, right? They make us more relatable to people. So that there's actually an advantage to those things. So that's a reframe I would offer people. But second would be, the more that you can reduce decision fatigue, the better. Now, what I mean by that is we sensitive strivers really work ourselves up when we have to make a choice about, oh, I need to publish my blog post today. Oh my goodness. And we really work ourselves up and put ourselves under a lot of pressure and make it a big deal. But if, let's say, you committed to once a week showing up on Instagram and you batched those in one day, you sat down and you did all 4 of your posts and you just automated them to be scheduled and go out at a certain time. That helps you reduce the decision fatigue of every Monday, oh my gosh, I have to figure out what I'm going to post. And all of a sudden you introduce a lot more opportunities to get in your own way and overthink things. So the more you can eliminate choices, the more you can commit to some sort of habit or process or automate things or pre-schedule them in advance, the more that you will smooth sail and get out of your own way.
I love that. And I think you're right. When you just do routine, repetition, like even with my podcast show, people are like, oh, I got to edit it, and it's got to be perfect in this. And I'm like, oh, really? I just upload it. It's natural, imperfect. It's just the way life is. And just take that pressure off. Now, Melody, how did you find time to fit in writing your book. What was the moment actually you thought, I'm going to write a book? I'm going to actually do this?
Well, it was a bit backwards in my case. So I always knew that I wanted to write a book sometime in my life. I was one of those kids where I begged to go to the library and I would come back with a stack of books and I would build forts to sit down and write in. And that I was just that kind of kid. So I always loved writing, always wanted to write a book, but I thought it was a long, long time away. And what happened was that in 2016, I was at a speaking event. And after the speaking event, a publisher came up to me, handed me their card and said, I would love for you to write a book for us. I don't care what it's about. We just want you to write a book for us. And I was so flattered and taken aback that I said, okay, sure. And I really fell into people pleasing. I fell into the lure of, oh my gosh, someone wants me. And I very quickly threw together a book proposal, or what I thought was a book proposal. It was really just a 2-page document, which for anyone who has ventured into writing a book, that is not a book proposal. A book proposal, I think, I think mine, when it was all said and done, was something like 100 pages or more. What ended up happening is that I wrote a proposal for the book I thought they wanted to write, like a very standard women in the workplace, how to be more confident sort of book, nothing more or less. And within a week, I had an offer. And I said, I don't know what I'm looking at. I need help here. So I went to the back of some of my books here and looked for who some of my favorite authors, who their agent was. And I cold contacted agents in New York. And my dream agent got back to me within, it was like 5 minutes or less of emailing her and said, let's get on the phone. Let's talk about this. And she, in a very caring way, said, I don't think this is the book you want to write. I think there's a different book you want to write, and I think you can get a better deal. So why don't you take your time, write the book proposal you want to write? And that sent me into about 2.5 years of wrestling with what I actually wanted to write. And in a fit of frustration one night, because I wrote multiple drafts of the book proposal, just hundreds and hundreds of pages, I ended up throwing away because my agent and my editors kept saying, there's something here, but you're not quite getting it yet. And so in frustration one night, I put all of the challenges that my clients faced on a whiteboard. And I had them as sticky notes so I could move them around. And I grouped them into themes. And it became very clear that there were 2 buckets. There was this sensitivity side and some of the challenges that came along with that. And there was a striving side and challenges that came along with that. And it was like I stepped back and it was like a lightning bolt. I really had one of those flash moments of saying, oh my gosh, sensitive, striver. Sensitive, striver.
That is incredible. Oh
yes.
my goodness.
And
this is incredible.
Yeah.
Wow.
Once I had the actual idea and the main message, once I was clear internally, everything flowed from there. And I wrote the book in, I think it was 8 or 9 months in total. So it was really that internal clarity that I was lacking. And once that was set in place, it sort of opened all the gates.
I'm having a goosebump moment just as you did that story. I'm like, goosebump moment. And I just can't believe that because your story, thank you for sharing that with us. But it just goes to show you just how many times you had to try to turn up, to do it, to be willing to surrender, throw it away, start over again, do it again. Like the amount of work until you actually got it. And I just love how you sat back and reflected on what you're doing in your day-to-day life, what's coming up for your clients, what are you learning, and how you could literally put it there and go, oh, sensitive striver. Like incredible journey, incredible story. And I'm so glad that you contacted that agent And you also in this process had to learn to open up, to be vulnerable. How did you feel in the moment when you had to talk about your own journey? Like those awkward, sticky moments. Did you feel when your book got published like, okay, it's out there now. There's no going back.
That's right. It's in print and it's on the shelf. So there's no going back from here. You're exactly right. You're right that was one of, if not the most challenging part of the book writing process for me, is that I'm used to supporting other people. I'm not used to opening up about myself. And my own imposter syndrome came up, where if I share these things about me, what will people think? They'll think I'm incompetent, or why would they want to learn from me if I've been through these things? And so I was very lucky to have great editors around me, amazing colleagues who helped be a sounding board, but also helped pull those stories out of me. I think if I was left to my own devices, I would have stayed very safe and walled off. But having other people ask me deeper and deeper questions and sort of be there with me and hold me accountable to, in a very gentle, supportive way, push through that discomfort, I think that was the game changer for me. And I think as I've become more comfortable opening up, I'm always very mindful of what's my intention behind sharing this. Yes, I am sharing this part of me, but what is that meant to provide for someone else? Is it meant to normalize a situation, teach them some sort of a lesson, provide them some sort of an action step, or a learning they can use for themselves, a mindset shift? So really being mindful that my story serves a purpose, not just to humanize me and help people connect, but also gives something else to other people as well.
I love how you had these incredible people around you to go share your truth, share your story, even if it's not rosy and shiny, share the whole of it, because then it makes you more relatable. Now, Melody, I could talk to you forever about your book. It's incredible. Everyone who's tuning in, you can get a copy of Trust Yourself from Booktopia. We're having a virtual Australian book party here, the Spirit Girl Book Club with Melody Wilding. You can also get a melodywilding.com to get access to her book. I know it's available on Amazon.com, every bookstore, Barnes and Nobles. It's out there now. You're getting great reviews. Before we say goodbye to our beautiful podcast listeners globally, our audience who have tuned in to listen to your story, like, what would be your one takeaway for them?
That your sensitivity and your ambition are gifts. So use them to the fullest.
I love that. And what's the best way now, Melody, to stay in touch with you after this podcast show?
Definitely make sure you pick up a copy of the book, like you said, available at Booktopia, Amazon, in all formats. You can also find me at my website, melodywilding.com. And if you were interested in that Strive assessment I shared earlier, there's a quiz on my website to assess which of those Strive qualities you are most unbalanced in, so you know where to start.
Well, Melody, thank you again. It's been an absolute pleasure and honor to have you on the podcast show. I love your work. I love everything you do. And I love your book. And that's why I really wanted to share it with everyone today. Trust Yourself. Congratulations on making the book happen. I know how much work you've put into it, but just hearing your story today is so inspiring. And thank you for all of your incredible tips. It's really going to help not only myself, but the rest of our Spirit Girl global audience. So thank you again. I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure.
We'll say goodbye now to Melody Wilding. Be sure to subscribe, to leave a 5-star rating and review, and to tell someone you love too. And together, let's feel good from within.